Hey, everyone. This is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. We have a great guest. His name is Mr. Alex Levin. He has a company called Regal. They're at regal.io. He'll explain what they do, but this whole episode is really down on creating and getting more prospective business out of your current client base. In other words, there's stuff sitting there that you just don't really know, and there's software, especially B2C and some B2B. It actually identifies attributes and key moments where you should be contacting people in the software, primarily through your customer service department. Now, those of you who are individual sellers that might be listening, well, I don't have a customer service department. No. We're going to talk a lot about how do you have things that are meaningful, relevant, personalized, and interesting, and how do you get through the door of the barriers that are set up, really, because when we're talking about customer service, we're not talking about just servicing people. We're talking about selling, right? If those of you who own companies, if you had a customer service department that was actually a sales-driven division, you'll sell more, you'll make more money, and quite frankly, you'll expand a lot more sales. So let's go talk to Alex right now.
Thank you for having me. So my background is actually, I went to liberal arts school, and, got smart and figured I needed to learn a little about technology. And so became a product manager and, started working at startups. And then just over 2 years ago, my co-founder and I started Regal, largely from our own experience. We had noticed that while a lot of businesses online were basic retail businesses selling commodity products, like a shirt or like something quite simple like a CD. Customers who shopped online now expected the rest of their lives to be online, and so they wanted healthcare and insurance and lending all on the internet. And in these categories, these more considered categories, it wasn't enough to just have a nice website. So we were actually working for Angie, who owns Angie's List and Home Advisor and these home services brands, and we found that even flow wasn't enough to get somebody to buy a fence installation or a renovation online. They needed to talk to somebody, and it was sort of against everything we'd learned. Right, we'd have been taught, don't talk to your customers online. Customer service is a cost center. Like, don't do it. And we found that actually talking to our customers in these more considered categories led to big increases in customers' desire to buy the product. And so our challenge was there wasn't really software that was built for that, right? So much of the software for talking with your customers was built on the premise of, it's a cost center, like deflect the customer inbound. And we've all experienced it, right? Hide the way to talk with the customer. And so Regal, the base premise was, in this world that's increasingly digital, how do we find the right moments to add a human touch? In industries like banking or in industries like life insurance or, online education, where it is critical to have that conversation and build trust. So today we're, 2.5 years in, it's a thriving business. It turns out that there's a lot of businesses that really do love talking with their customers, and excited to be here and chat more.
So I love this conversation because I'm the old guy on the phone, right? I mean, compared to you. And, back when I was growing up, there was no internet. There was no online. Well, online was a billboard, that you might see on a highway or possibly a commercial on television, right? That was it.
Yeah.
So we grew up talking to people because that's just the way you did business. And the more you embraced in the sales channel, you got in and you talked to people, the more information that was exchanged, the more sales were made. That's the way it was. Then there seemed to be this shift that happened, as you're saying, people looking at like, how do we bring it all online and how do we maximize our profitability? Let's do that without talking to people, right? Because we all know that employees of companies are a very high cost center for a company, but the ROI is there, is what you're telling me. So like, we're going back to let's talk to people. The ROI is there, and you're actually finding hidden revenue and hidden profitability for companies that was probably just flushing out of their sales cycle to begin with anyways. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just give you an example. My wife grew up in a small town in Colorado, and one of her friends is now an insurance agent in town. And for years, she had an office, and people walked into the office and they said, I want life insurance. And she would, based on sort of what they needed, put together a quote for them, and she had a thriving business doing that. Today, right, that's changed.
Yeah.
So customers are discovering life insurance online. They're not physically walking into our office. So she'll be in her office and ding, something will go off and she'll get a person's name and their phone number. She doesn't know where they came from, who they are, what other people have talked to them. She doesn't know anything. She picks up her cell phone and tries to call them, and it doesn't go very well, or doesn't go as well, because it's not that in person. So even for businesses that understand that they should be talking to customers, they're having trouble doing it online. So the internet creates more distribution, but and it makes some discovery easier, but it's still preventing that customer and that insurance agent who has the information the customer needs from communicating effectively. So what we identified basically as an opportunity is to say, in this world where you're going to be online, in this world where there's more information about customers than ever, you can't have somebody sitting in an office with a cell phone guessing who they should call and why and what to say. What you should be doing, and what Regal does, is you should be using the real-time behavioral information about what customers are doing to personalize outreach to them. What channel should you reach out? When should you reach out? What is the message that you should be using? Who have they already spoken to? What's the context and the history of this conversation? So think about, 50 years ago, a club, you might walk into a private club where they go, "Oh, it's so nice to see you, Doug. We have your table. We have your drink. We know last time you didn't like this food, so try something different." Right? You felt like they cared about you, and that level of service was part of why you went there. And I think part of the sort of what we're seeing is the best brands, the highest growth brands, are remembering, to your point, because it was forgotten for a while, but remembering that service is a differentiator. And in their business, they can look and use Regal to see, in this specific situation, in the month one retention, if I engage in a personal conversation, here's the incremental cost and here's the incremental revenue. So not only am I giving good service, but I'm doing it in a way where it's ROI positive. And you can decide as a brand what that means. Is it you need 1 unit of revenue for every unit of cost? Or is your sort of bar, you need to make 3 times the revenue per cost you spend? Whatever it is, you can look across the life cycle and find the moments where you can still go and have that personal touch in order to give that customer a better experience and help them buy your product.
And the cost of acquisition of a new client is far higher for most companies than the cost of repeat business from existing clients. So it sounds to me, Alex, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds to me like a lot of these brands just are getting away from the basics of human communication and human needs. And what you guys have done is figured out, okay, we could do this, but we could do this cost effectively and bring that back.
Yeah, what I'd say is the industry that moved online first was retail, because it was simpler products. They were sort of commodity. You could show a picture, a price, a review, and people would buy them. And what we've been talking about in basic retail, you really removed all that customer service for a lot of these businesses, as that was seen as a cost center. And I think what we've seen is that the businesses that are more open to having this communication with the customer are the ones that are coming online now in the second wave. So we call it high consideration. So insurance, lending, education, local services, healthcare. These are about half of the consumer economy, and these are more considered purchases. So in these industries, because they've always had the person involved, because they don't necessarily believe that what retail did is right for them, they're more open to having that sort of human touch. And we work with them a lot. What's interesting, though, just to call it out, is in retail, when we do tests, it has the same value. So having a conversation with your customer, even in a retail sort of commoditized product, can lead to great outcomes. So I'd call out companies like Curated that do this very well, where in certain categories, they now sell products online with a human being that helps you, and they see great value from that. I think a lot of brands are afraid to do it because they've seen customer service as a cost center for so long. A lot of brands don't have the technology to do it because, again, their tools are helping them avoid the communication, not proactively do it. And, they sort of misinterpret this. This is not us saying you should let every customer contact you all the time, because that would be, sort of a huge cost. What we're saying is find the moments where that your customer is struggling, where, you shouldn't be so arrogant that your product online is perfect. And reach out to them and say, "Hi, sir, or ma'am, I see that you have a home. I see that you're looking to get, a new fence for that home. How can I help you?" It doesn't have to be a hard sell. You're truly just trying to help that person figure out, if the product that you're selling is the right product for them. And we see huge success even in retail. Like I say, the reason we don't focus on retail is they philosophically, the narrative is sort of in retail is don't talk to your customer. Right. And in retail, they don't have teams of people that are used to doing the sort of outbound motion where they're engaging with people. So I think there's, huge potential in that category. We just don't focus on it today.
So years and years and years ago, I would do studies that were offline, and it clearly showed that the people who would buy, when they purchased, the reason and how they made the decision was they looked at the value perception and the service perception of what they were buying.
Yeah.
It was 80-20. Those two categories were 80% of that process. And then, things like price and convenience and
I'll give you another example. It's become very sort of clear these days. So is in banking, basic retail banking. So when I was a kid, I banked at M&T, and there was, Bob the banker, who, I didn't know very well, but made mistakes sometimes, but I didn't take my money out of M&T because of that, what little money I had. I'd say, oh, Bob, you made a mistake, but it's okay. I'm going to stay with M&T. Today, the neobanks online, and I won't name names, but you can guess sort of the big neobanks, they've eliminated all service. Well, guess what? That means that basically they're built on a very similar technology platform. The features are very much the same. There's a little differentiation on brand, but if you're not differentiating on service, what they've identified is immediately, if something goes wrong, if that neobank doesn't do the right thing for the customer immediately churns, because there's no bot, there's no personal relationship. There's no service quotient, to your point, that's getting them to believe in some value other than, did you never make a mistake? So I think the sort of brands that are much smarter in these products are realizing that the next sort of level of differentiation is not on technology, is not on even brand, but is on service quality. And so again, back to the future, where now, it was that way, 50 years ago, and it's going to be that way again.
We're speaking with Mr. Alex Levin of Regal at regal.io. And I find this fascinating, Alex, this conversation, because it's really common sense when it comes down to it, right? And we're talking about selling. We're talking about sales. How do we sell? And there's always a churn or a churn in a client base. How do you retain that client base? Far more. How do we expand the sale from that current client base? Because happier clients, happier customers will tell other people, they will give us referrals.
Yeah.
And you're in industries that you were explaining also that are kind of highly emotionally connected, like banking. And it's money, life insurance, right? But in any industry, like I'll take retail, as you were saying, my wife's the perfect example of this. She becomes brand loyal because of service. She likes high quality clothing. And when she has a challenge with something, she would like to talk to a human being.
Yeah.
Those companies who sell extremely high quality clothing, she has abandoned them over the fact that she's had challenges with a return policy, for example.
Yeah.
And something as buying something as simple as a book, what people don't realize, and I think you've hit the nail on the head, is that people want to be able to resolve challenges quickly. She just bought a book, for example. She's from Poland originally, so she speaks English, but she wanted to get rid of her accent. Or not get rid of it, but use it when she wants to, right? So she was buying books and courses and things like this to do this. And in the book that she bought, it said, hey, you have access to these things online. Well, she can't access them online. Now, this is a major publisher, so I'm not going to name the right? But the reality is electronic communication, nobody's getting back to her. Finally get back to her. They get back to her and they say, oh, well, in this book, you don't have access to this. You needed to buy a different book. So she's like, I'll buy the different book. So she buys the different book. Same problem, gets back. This is going on for a week and a half.
Yeah.
Right. And what's happening is I can see the service level is just breaking down rapport. The trust is going away. The likability is going away. The respect is going away. And so this is attrition from the inside. Now, here's the nutty part. My wife, as a book buyer, will buy 2 to 3 books a week and read them. So if she's just one example, and let's say we had, 5,000 people like that this major company's burning off, how much money is that in profit and revenue, right? And people don't think about this in selling. They think about, let's sell at any cost. We'll look at the top line. If we're ahead of where we were, then we're doing great. But what I'm hearing you say is, that's awesome, but let's look at the retention in the middle line as well, which is, how do you retain more clients? How do you expand the circle of influence? And how do you get clients to tell other clients about other people to bring them to you so you have zero cost of acquisition?
Yeah, I agree. I think, to what I said, I think there are 2 different problems that are happening. One is philosophically, some brands believe customer service is a cost center and don't want to think of it as an opportunity to drive revenue. I'd say that's changing. It's become sort of customer service has become better understood. The leaders who run those teams want to not be only a call center, they want to be seen as a revenue driver as well.
Right.
So those teams philosophically are changing opinions. I think the second block are those technology, because even if those teams want to do the right thing, and when it was a little office on Main Street, the person would walk back in and you talk to the owner and it would be handled. These are businesses that have millions of customers a month. You can't possibly do it just because you want to do it. You need the right technology. So that's really where Regal came from, is as we started digging in and figuring out what we wanted to do, there wasn't technology to identify the right users and to proactively, based on what they were doing, reach out to them in the channel that was right with the right message. That didn't exist. And there definitely was no ability to A/B test and see what the lift was and see what the revenue impact and the cost impact was of these different strategies. Because you're running this not with one person, you're running this with hundreds of people. So the cost of doing these revenue generating programs is quite high, and you can't do it incorrectly, or it's quite problematic. So I think without the right tools, people are going to struggle to do it. And the contact center software that people are using today is not built for this. So, that's why we suggest people use their contact center software for customer service and use Regal for all the proactive things they're doing. Just to give a healthcare example, to get out of retail, we have a client who specifically works with diabetes patients. And what's happened is that by moving online, those patients, don't see their doctor necessarily as much in person. And those patients now, with all the devices that exist, are creating more and more data than ever before. And so one of the challenges that this brand had is it was creating a gap between the patients and the brand. And so what we're able to do with Regal is take all of the data, the HIPAA compliant data, because we're HIPAA compliant, right? And make sure that if certain things happened, proactively, the nurses were reaching out to the people and helping them. So they weren't sort of waiting for the next doctor's appointment. They weren't waiting for the patient to say, I think I might have an issue. They were actually proactively helping them. And I think that same thing that's happening in healthcare, where it's obvious that there's a dissociation, there's more data, it's happening in every industry online. And so the opportunity is to stop imagining that, you're going to have a human being sitting and looking at reams of data and figuring out who to reach out to, and start using technology to identify proactively the right segments and what you should say to them. That's where, we're so powerful. In email marketing, it's become very common with tools like Iterable and Braze. We're the equivalent for conversational channels like phone, SMS, email, where you're sort of doing something similar to what the marketing team was doing in an automated fashion. You're now doing it with a human conversation.
What you guys have done, and this, I've always taught this right from the beginning, customer service should be a sales function. That's been our philosophy for 50 years of doing, literally teaching, right? And there was a lot of pushback early on, because just like you said, people looked at this as, oh no, they're customer service, they're retention, they talk to people, they handle issues, whatever, right? And as you said, early on, you could walk into the owner and go, hey, listen, this is happening. And it's like, well, all right, let's fix this. Yeah. But in this myriad of online and separation, that's happened, it's not as easy to get to talk to somebody in that capacity. But what I hear you folks have done, and I think all companies should look at this, and I think individual sellers should look at this as well, those who are salespeople and independent business owners, is how do we proactively reach out? Because you've got a customer service department now proactively becoming an outbound sales force in some capacity. And so how do we do that? Because that opens up, it's almost like opening up, we used to have direct channels, indirect channels, right? And now this is kind of like a third channel that's opened up, that money's just sitting there. The customer service departments can go out and actually mine. So they're actually becoming a sales function far more than just a sit back and take care of the client position.
Oh, agreed. And I'll give you the other thing that shocks people. So the general narrative is that phone calls are going away and the customers don't want to talk on the phone.
Right.
And it's wrong.
Agreed.
So we look at sort of different ways of communicating with the customer. The most spammy actually is email. And you know how I know it's the most spammy? There's only like a 1 or 2% click rate when you send somebody an email. The next most spammy is SMS. And, sure, you can get 10% of people to, respond to an SMS or click on an SMS. And that's much better than email. And so SMS is the new popular thing, but it's still pretty spammy. On phone, answer rates on our system, across the whole system, average answer rate is between 20 and 30%.
Yep.
Multiples of those other channels, because what you're doing is you're making sure that you know that the customer cares about you. You can brand calls on cell phones so they know who it is that's calling them. We're doing it in a way that's not intrusive. We're doing it in a way that's helping them. So SoFi, for instance, is a customer where they're doing student loan refinance. And as the customer is going through that flow, often on their cell phone, if they get stuck, they're getting a call that says SoFi. That's helpful. That's not hurtful. The sort of magic is if you can have your senior team realize that when you know who the high intent customers are, you should be reaching them on the phone, because that's the place where you get 30% of them engage with you instead of spamming them with email and only get 2% to click. That's magic. Sure, if there's a very low intent user group and you're going to just send out an email that no one's going to look at, that's up to you. I'm not going to make a comment. But where there are people that are high intent and struggling to get your product, don't waste opportunities. Don't just email them, call them, and actually get a third of them on the phone.
And the crazy part about that is everybody else the majority of people are taking the opposite path. So it's easier to get a hold of people than it ever was before because they're not being inundated.
I'd say the other thing that we find is if you ask people, hey, do you answer the phone? Everybody says no. And so that's people's gut impression. But if you turn around and say, look, you're looking for a school online and you can't go and visit the school in person, what sort of channel do you want to use to talk with them to figure out what you want? Everybody says phone. 65, 70% say phone. And then the second most common is SMS, and email is like nothing. So it's not that nobody answers the phone. It's that they only want to use the phone on things that are important to them. And they want to use it in a moment that is right for them. So not just like at a moment that's going to be inconvenient. And they want to make sure the person on the other line is a knowledgeable brand ambassador who's going to help them and not just try to sell them. And so it's, I think, about understanding sort of your audience and making sure you're reaching the right people, with that channel and helping them get what they want instead of being pushy.
Yeah. And the more complex the sale or the more parts to a sale, the more people do want to talk to one another. I mean, statistics clearly have shown across the board that 7 out of 10 CEOs won't take the sales meeting to move it to the next level without a phone call first.
Yeah. So now we're talking about, I think, a little bit B2B. So
right.
B2B, I think, is interesting. The volumes are much lower. And my experience in B2B is that most people don't use much data to inform who they're reaching out to or why or when or any of that. What ends up happening is there's a lot of cold calling in B2B that is unsuccessful. Now, I think your point is right, which is that it's much better to have a conversation with somebody in B2B sales than not, especially if it's a higher value product. That is an important part of it. But what I encourage teams to do is to think about what data they can use to personalize the outreach, even if you don't, have enormous amounts of data. Their LinkedIn profile, so sort of where they live, what company they work for, what role they have, what they were doing before. Don't just send them a random email. Don't just call them and not have anything to say. Be helpful. Make sure the first sentence is not, oh, I want you to hear what I have to say.
Right.
Make it about them. Make the first sentence, I came to your site and this wasn't working, or I came to your site and, I really was excited about how you did this. Make sure it's something where even if they don't buy from you, there's sort of value for them that's coming out of it. And you can only do that if you're spending the time to actually think about who that person is at that company and what is sort of, something that they're thinking about today. So even when we interview salespeople, I'll ask all the time, pretend you're talking to a CEO of X company. What are their priorities? Because it's not you. They're not thinking all day about the thing that you're selling. That's not their priority. Their priority might be, if it's a retail company, increasing product selection. It might be making sure customer service is better. It might be increasing revenue or improving margin, depending on where they are in their business. That's what they're thinking about. So make sure that whatever you're going to talk to them about fits in within their top 3 priorities. Otherwise, it's going to go away and they're not going to, want to talk with you.
It makes total sense. And we're speaking with Mr. Alex Levin. Regal is the name of the company, regal.io. I love what you guys are doing because, I'm a humanistic guy, right? I'm one of those guys that likes to bond with people. And early on in sales, that was dissuade, right? I mean, it was like, just go in close, don't worry about it, don't build a relationship. And I never could really play that game. It was just not me. And then one day I realized, I've been in these companies and I'm, got 300-400 salespeople in these companies and I'm the number one guy, right? And people are asking me, what do I do? And I would do what you're doing, but I had to do it manually. I would find the opportune times to reach out. I would find the opportune pieces of information about people and would connect on that level. And that made the differentiator in the close rate. And this is what a lot of people didn't understand. It made a difference in the close rate. It made a difference in the average order size.
Yeah.
So my average order size in many of the companies was almost 2.5x in some companies than the other salespeople's, size orders. And my close rate was almost double. In many cases, it was over double.
Yeah.
And it was because I took the opportunity, the time to look at this, because I've always been under the understanding there's two ROIs in business. There's the business ROI and then the personal ROI.
Yeah.
And when either one of those are affected, people are going to complain and they're not going to be happy. Now, the business ROI, a lot of times that can get fixed, but the personal ROI, people get their ego invested in it. And that one is what stops people and has them going out online and saying really nasty things about company. But to your point, I just had this happen to me today, Alex. I've had some company after me because this podcast has been growing very rapidly. People are now saying, oh, geez, we can help you out grow your podcast even more, right? Yeah. And I'm getting like 6, 7 of these a week coming through an email, and their first lines are out like, urgent, right? And I'd be like, okay, urgent, what's this? And then I go and they're like, we can help you grow your podcast. It's like, that's not urgent, right? That is something. So mismatch name, whatever. But most of these things that are coming through are really not well thought out. But then a company's hit me 3 times with 3 different emails. The first 2 are irrelevant. This gentleman today said, I was looking at your website and I think we can improve your conversion rates and your audience if you look at the language in your website. And he detailed it out. And he just did it in a nice two little paragraph thing. And he said, I think this would help. And I think we have more to look at. If you're interested, let me know. I immediately took that appointment because he made it personalized. He made it relevant. He made it meaningful. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is when you do this with a software process that you guys have developed, is this automatically starts bringing this information for people to connect on.
Oh yeah, even better than that. So in B2B, you can afford to sort of have human beings figuring this stuff out because it's relatively small volume and the prices are lower. In B2C, again, you have millions of customers and the prices are lower. So you can't have people wasting time figuring that out. So we're not just surfacing the information. We're literally creating the text that are going out, creating the call task for the person to do so that we keep that agent really, really efficient. So we don't want them hunting and pecking and looking around. We want them going from call to call to call, the information they need so they can get on and say, hi, Mrs. Smith, based on what I'm seeing, X, Y, and Z. And so the thing that the human does very well is emote and solve a complicated problem and help them get what they want. The thing the machine does very well, right, the technology, is identify where are the moments where the people need help. What is the content you should be reaching out with? What script you should be using. Like, should you be saying something if they're from New York that's different than if they're from Florida? Should you be saying different things depending on what products they're looking at? What should the greeting be? All these are things you could, as a sort of a human salesperson, it's really hard to know what is the right thing to do. Right. But from technology's perspective, it's very simple to create all these variations in real time and make sure that we're doing the right thing for the right customer.
So you've got it down onto the personal connection level. So if they're in New York, for example, where people tend to speak a lot faster, and
it may be as simple as in the South talking about y'all and making sure, sort of egregious now, but saying, hey, I saw the Marlins in Florida yesterday versus I saw the Yankees in New York. Right. It may be that sort of stuff, but it really does make an impact and make sure that, you're having the right conversation with the right person. If you're only having 1 or 2 sales calls a day, you can do it manually. And that's what happens in B2B. But in B2C, people are having 10 conversations an hour. You can't do that manually. You need systems to make sure that you're going to be saying the right thing. And ultimately, we're helping, that company make more revenue. But really what's exciting also is we're helping all of those agents do their job. So back to my wife's friend, I want to get her insurance company on Regal so that she can ultimately make more money. Because if she has the right tools, she's great at her job. But without the right tools, she's going to fail.
Right. It's like showing up at a construction site and you don't have the saw you need to actually cut the right hole in the board.
Yeah.
And, you didn't even know you needed it. So you're supplying that information. So this is great because you never get a second chance to make the first great impression. So that is a real kudo. So, Alex, let's say people want to, they go, this makes total sense, or, this guy's smart. How do they get a hold of you guys?
So yeah, our website is regal.io, and they can always email us at hello@regal.io. If you have a B2C business, in these industries, so things like healthcare, insurance, lending, local services, education, especially if you already have teams that are doing outreach, whether it's on SMS or email, we'd love to chat with you.
I always like to ask founders and CEOs this one question at the end, if possible. How do you like to be approached to buy? In other words, a lot of CEOs and founders have told me I don't like to be sold to, but I do like to buy. So if people were like approaching you as the founder, owner, CEO of the company, how should they approach you? In other words, what do you like?
Yeah. So a few things, in email, you can imagine I get a lot of email.
Sure.
And I use a product called Gated, so that anybody emailed me from an email address I don't recognize, it goes into a separate folder, and they either have to say that they know me, so that if they happen to know me, like, it'll go through, or they, can donate to a charity of my choice, if they want me to look at the email. So that at least limits all of the just automated things. So you couldn't imagine how many times people are sending me what they are pretending is a personalized email. But when this, I have an automated response, it goes back and says, hey, if you want to reach me, do X, Y, and Z. They don't even look at it. So to me, that's sort of insulting. If they're not even going to take the time to personalize the email and like look at my response with an automated response, but look at it and decide they want to talk to me, why'd they email me in the first place? Which is why it goes to that folder and it goes away. But if they are at least going to say, oh, no, really, I wanted to talk to you, Alex, and here's why, and they put in the reason why, or they, pay the donation, I'll look at it. So now, you can guarantee that if you're going to take the time to do that thing, I'm going to see the email. In that email, what do you do? Like, if you're just copying and pasting, I'm going to delete it like immediately. I'm not even going to bother. But, if I read the first sentence and I see that it's something about, us or our business or you or something interesting, and not like you're from New York, I'm from New York, like that doesn't help anything. But, something that actually is going to help our business, for sure, I'll read the next email, and either I'll take the call or I'll make sure that somebody on our team takes the call. So I think the question is, like, do you really have something to offer that company? If you do, and you have something interesting to say, like, people are going to look at it, or at least I will look at it. Honestly, I would love to take the phone calls that I get, especially if it's from products that are interesting. I think the challenge those brands have is twofold. One, I'm almost always booked. So if you call me at a random time, I can't pick up because I'm talking to somebody. And two, it's coming from a random number, so I don't know who it is. So, if you said, hey, it's so-and-so, or if you use, like, we have branded caller ID on cell phones, use branded caller ID, so I know it's so-and-so. And I go, oh, shoot, I've been meaning to buy that product. I really want to talk to that guy. I would pick it up. But when it's a random number, when I'm in another call, it's never going to happen. So, I don't know if that's helpful to folks, but I'd say, if you really do want to talk to somebody and you put in the time to figure it out, and, figure out how to email them, how to call them, when they sort of are available, at least I'm very willing to talk.
So what I heard was meaningful, relevant, personalized, and interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I try, like, my co-founder and I have been lucky, and sort of we've found sort of mentors over time. We've found sort of things that have helped us learn over time. So even when I had somebody the other day, last week, emailed me from Australia, just said something nice about the company. So, said something that we were doing, was interesting, and he liked it. And I think he's just graduating from school, and he asked us to send him a t-shirt. So we sent him a t-shirt. Like, I don't know. I don't subscribe to the school of thought some people do, where you should ignore everybody. I think that's terrible. As much as possible, if you're putting in the effort to reach me, I will try to at least respond, even if it's to say, no, we can't do this.
Makes sense. Thanks for sharing that, Alex. And thanks for being on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast and bringing your A game. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What a concept, right? Talking to human beings, people who are buying, being able to do this at scale. Wow. Why haven't people been doing this at scale? They made the shift from years ago. It's human beings talking to human beings. And that's all you had. Then we go to an electronic revolution, if you will, and everybody out there is trying to go to electronic, and we're not trying to talk to human beings. Well, guess what? We're disassociating, and we're leaving sales on the table. not only are we leaving sales on the table, quite frankly, we're upsetting people who never needed to be upset in the first place. Simple little things that get involved. Play with the personal ROI. Remember, there's two types of ROI, the business ROI, the personal ROI. When you're selling, don't forget either or of them. When you're servicing, don't forget either or of them, right? Because value and service make up the huge amount of the perception on whether or not people are happy or if they buy in the first place. And the more you can support those two aspects of your selling, the more you will sell. It's just simple. Guys and gals, he, she, they, and everyone else, please understand that you're dealing with human beings. And that's one thing that I love about what Alex and his partner have done in the business. They have figured out that we're dealing with human beings. And if we get back to that human connection, we can solve challenges that people are having or open up opportunities from either those problems or new opportunities from an opportunity they discovered because they have the data, right? And as long as you have the data, or if you want to say data, either one, as long as you have that, you'll have this ability to look at this. And then you know, with software, it's really great because that can trigger you, can nudge you and say, hey, this is what we should be doing. So if you haven't checked it out at regal.io. If you love this content of this episode, give us a 5-star review, if you will. Tell your friends. I know it's kind of a pain sometimes to go do a 5-star review, but if you really love this, it would be very helpful. The more we have, the more we can help people, the better the algorithms, the more people this reaches, the more information that comes back to us. And those of you who are sending in your request, please keep doing that. If you have some expertise or you know someone who has expertise and you think it'll fit the show, let us know. Reach out to YouMatter, YOUMATTER, at ceosalesstrategies.com, and we'll be happy to take a look at it. We'll always get back to you. And if it makes sense, we'll have you or your expert on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. If you want to improve your sales, go from point A to point B to point C, or point A to point D. You want to get into the top 1% of earners, or just be in the top 5% of earners. By the way, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people make a lot of money in the top 5%, right? If you just want to be getting better over and over and over and over, reach out to me directly at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. Let me know what you're looking for. I just had a gentleman, his name is Kirk, reach out, told me the exact thing he was looking for. We were able to solve his challenge quickly. So Kirk, thank you for reaching out to us directly. And I urge all of you to do so. As always, go out and sell something. Listen to this again and again. Pick the nuggets out of this. Make it meaningful, relevant, personalized, right? Make it interesting to people. It entices them to want to communicate with you. Treat them like human beings. You'll win, they win. So always sell win-win. Go out and sell something. Sell a lot of it. Make it profitable for both of you. Play win-win. You will win. They will win. This is Doug C. Brown. Until next time, the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, saying thanks for listening and to your success.